Welcome to our presentation today on designing and installing garden paths and raised beds. My name is Lynn Wild. I am the K-State Extension and Research Master Gardener Vice President Program Chair. And Jack Carson is our presenter today. And you will learn how to build solid paths, walls, and raised beds in the home garden. And just a few tips, household tips today. Be sure and mute and turn off your video, and we will handle questions at the end of the presentation. Jack is a retired civil engineer. He also held a master's degree in construction management from the University of Missouri, Columbia. Borrowing from over 50 years of experience in the construction and construction materials industry, he will share his expertise on how to build a solid garden path.
Thank you.
Take it away.
Well, that's enough about that, so we'll move over here to the first slide.
I can hear you.
Definition of hardscapes, because pathways and raised beds are essentially hardscapes. And so hardscapes, the real easy answer is anything in the garden that doesn't have any chlorophyll in it. But these are man-made, and the key words here is they enhance or they complement.
Jack, would you want a remote to change the slide, or do you want to do it manually?
Remote would be great.
Okay, go ahead, and I'll get you a
All right,
remote.
thank you. So this was, okay, so hardscapes are either functional or aesthetics. And so I've got them listed that way. And of course, pathways I've got up here on top and raised beds down there on the bottom. But these are some of the other hardscapes that I'll be given presentation. I give a presentation that includes all of these. But I'm going to concentrate today on pathways and raised beds. Functional. Most of pathways and raised beds are functional. And here are the pluses and minuses of the pathways. The outline areas of the garden, ingress and egress. They can add some aesthetics to a garden, but it kind of depends on the type of garden you have. So, thank you.
Whoop, we got a problem.
Okay. We gotta have something else plugged in.
I gotta put the chip in so you can use it, and we've got all the ports used.
Oh, okay, that's all right. I'll work on it.
There's not
Okay.
on the other side.
Huh? We don't know. That's a different port.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we tried.
Yeah, but here's some of the negatives. They can be expensive, you know, especially if you put them in right. And you do need some maintenance. Raised beds, very easy to control your medium. Better use of the space, really, you know, because you've got everything contained right there. They make maintenance and harvesting much easier. But they do require more moisture, and I'll get into that a little bit down the line. But I always say a raised bed is anywhere in the neighborhood of 8 inches high. That's what we use. Most of them are about 8 inches. If you go to 12 inches or a 10-inch board, your side, you're talking about some pretty good money. So a 2x8 is fairly inexpensive, and it does give you enough room there to control your growing medium. You have at least 8 inches of your growing medium you can control. And then it also, you don't need as much moisture in an 8-inch bed as you would a taller bed. So I do know also that there are some raised beds up on stilts for handicap. And I don't go into that, but you could take all this same information and put it into a raised bed that's on stilts. Here we go. Pathways, here's the different kinds of pathways. A mulch pathway, economical, easy to, but higher maintenance. Gravel, I don't know if any of you have ever watched any English movies, but they always drive in on this gravel driveway and they walk down gravel paths. Well, they've got a different kind of gravel we do. Because about the only thing that we could use here might be pea gravel. It's rounded, and so you can't walk on that very well. But there are some clean screen limestone chips that are available. They're a little bit pricey, but you can make a base out of, I'll get to some of the bases you can use, and then put an inch to an inch and a half of these limestone chips on top of it. And they do make a nice gravel pathway. Once again, though, fairly high maintenance. And then you also need to put some kind of containment on the sides to keep them from getting in your garden and every place else. Stepping stones, a little more expensive, but they're fairly low maintenance once you get them in. Brick and concrete pavers, pretty expensive, but low maintenance. And then flagstones are expensive, time coming in from someplace else, you know, and it's a little bit difficult for the average person to make that look good. I've done it. I've worked on one several times, and we would work on it. We'd come back the next day with, no, it doesn't look good. So we change it around. I'm trying to get these flagstones to match up. It's not an easy job. So. I think I missed, I went back, I got to go back. No. This is okay. Let's see here, get over here. There we go. Dimensions for pathways. Stepping stones. 1 to 6 inches in depth, 1 to 4, 2-4 in width. You know, whatever you find. Some people use natural stone that they find. You know, we have a lot of thin layered limestone that's on top. But when they do construction projects, a lot of times that gets exposed, and it's not good for anything. A lot of people claim that. They're kind of hard to work with because their sizes are so irregular. But that's one of the things you can do, and it's fairly economical. There are some faux stone that are made to look like regular stone. There are the square ones you can get at the box stores. The important thing here when you do a stepping stone is to get your pace right for when you're walking. And so if that pace isn't right, your pathway is going to be a problem for people, problematic. So when I say center to center, especially if they're a nice square stone that you got, it's real easy to figure out center to center because they're all the same depth and width. And so you go from the back of one stone to the front of the next stone and make that 2 feet, and you'll be center to center. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Back to the one, front to the other. So that measurement will work out good for a short walk. If you have a longer walk, you can go to 2.6, and it's comfortable stride. If you go 2'6", on the center to center. Solid pathways, that's the minimum width, 1.6. Normal is, I'm gonna say 2.6. ADA whatnot should be at least 36 to 4 feet. so if you're building a garden where you know it's ADA compliant, might want to keep that in mind. It's because that's the minimum for that. This is mulch pathway. This is one of the. I took this as a picture of one of my friends. I liked the way it fits in and everything. I wasn't real enthused about the way that she lined it, because those are nice stones that she had, very nice stones, but she didn't put a base underneath these. And so they tend to wobble and move and get out of line. And so if that's the look that you want, if you want that kind of more casual like look, fine. I'm more a kind of straight line type person, and I would rather have the containment be a straight line, but it does, her pathway looked very good in her garden. Okay, this is a stepping stone. These are the faux stones I was talking about. They came in 4 different sizes. And this is a garden path in our backyard at home. And so what I did was, every one that I came to, the 4th one, I would turn it. So it didn't look the same. It was still the same stone, but unless you really were watching what you were doing, it looked like a different stone. And it was pretty easy to do the center to center, even though these were kind of irregular. They were all pretty much about 18 inches. And so it was pretty easy to put them on center to center. These also have a crushed stone treated base underneath them. And so we'll get into that a little bit later on, how important that is, because they have not shifted. And same with these up underneath this harbor here, they've got a base underneath them. And so they haven't shifted either. But that's very important to have its base underneath your pathways. There's a flagstone that we did this for the garden. This is one of the sites we had for one of our garden tours that we have in Johnson County every 2 years. And so this particular lady had a real nice garden in the back, but no way to get to it, a nice way to get to it. And so we built this pathway for her, and then she put all this landscaping in, and that's what these notes are, what different kind of landscaping it is. But once again, she ordered enough base material. We put the crushed stone base underneath this, a treated crushed stone base, and I'll get into that. And we put that underneath there, and I haven't been over here lately, but I was over there 3 or 4 or 5 years after it was in, and they hadn't shifted at all. And it wasn't the best place to put it, because this is their house on this side, and then it fell off down like this to an area between the 2 houses. And this soil down in here was always wet, because as you know, the area between these houses, you got the downspouts feeding it. You got it's sloped that way. So most of the time between the houses are pretty wet. And even when we did this up in here, it was still, the soil up there was still pretty wet also. So I'll get into why wet soils and dry soils are a problem here in this part of our world. Okay, question. How many in here have gone out and put a lot of trouble in to getting their bird bath in and getting it level, and so it looks real nice, the pool's level, and then you come back at the end of the season, the water's almost tipped down, and the other side is almost dry. We all have done it. I mean, it's just, it happens. So I'm going to tell you why this happens. Leveling issues. We're cursed in this area with what they call fat clays. And you probably see it, you know, you get these nice rains in April and May and first part of June, and then all of a sudden it turns off hot. And your yard turns into a brick. And the soil starts separating from your house. And all kinds of things starting to happen. Well, that's because these fat clays swell when they get wet, shrink when they get dry. And so your bird bath swelled for a while, then it shrank for a while, and swelled for a while, and next thing you know, it's not plumb at all, it's not level at all. And so that's what happens when you have these fat clays. Parts of the world, our daughter lives out in Denver. They have some clays out there that expand 40%. And so they have a fairly new house. It has a basement in it. Does not have a concrete floor. It's got a wood plank floor. And that's because if that water heater would happen to spring a leak or anything, any moisture would happen to get down in there. Colorado is very arid anyway, but if that clay gets dry and you had a concrete pavement underneath it, it just come right up. With 40% swell, you wouldn't have a basement floor anymore. And so there's parts of the world that have it worse than we do. And at 14 to 18% though will move things. It'll move the slabs underneath big box stores. It'll move the pavement out here. So a lot of the construction that goes on in this part of the country, the soil is stabilized underneath it. And so I'll get into how it's stabilized. So like I say, it could be as small as your bird bath, or it could be a big box. So you can replace these fat clays with a low volume change material. Like a crushed stone that's not treated. But it takes quite a little bit of this material to do that. Up to 12 inches, and that's pretty expensive. And so you can stabilize the existing soil with some products like cement, straight type 1 Portland cement, or fly ash used to be available. It's not available anymore. The KDOT uses lime on clay soils. They use cement on sandy, silty soils like you'd have in the Call River bottoms. And so if you stabilize it, you're stabilizing a thinner section. And so it's a lot easier to stabilize a thinner section than replacing a larger section with, say, 12 inches of select material. So, and sometimes the select material I'm talking about here is not readily available. So you got expenses to bring that in, and then you have to excavate out. So you got an extra expense there to excavate this out, and you put the non-volume or the low volume change material in. So that's our problem. It's the soil that we're cursed with. So I don't know if I'm going through this a little too fast, maybe, I don't know.
You're doing just fine.
Okay. So best options for a stabilized base are, KDOT calls it AB3, and it's just a crushed limestone. Got a sample of it here. And one of the problems with AB3 is the gradation. In other words, the particle size allows for some larger stones and then all the way down to dust. And I'll pass this around. You can see, you can feel them in there. There's big stones in there. And this will work for your base, but it's a little hard to work with because of these larger stones. So you're trying to get this base flat as this table to start out with, and it's kind of hard to do when you got these large stones kind of poking through the top. And so there's another base, by the way, MoDOT refers to this as a type 1 aggregate base. That's on the Missouri side. This is a material they call dust. Some of the material yards have it. I don't know. The only one I know that I get it from is one out in a lake they call Riverview Stone. And this is, you can see, it has this, the stone in it, but it also has enough fines in it. So that it's a whole lot easier to get that surface smooth to put up whatever you're gonna put on it, whether you're gonna put flagstone or whether you're gonna put brick, stepping stones, whatever you're gonna put on there, it's a whole lot easier if you got something like this. It's called dust. I know that Suburban sells, by the way, it's high price. Don't be right. They sell a product called chips, and they're clean limestone chips. The only problem of it is they don't have enough fines in there to cement everything together. They don't have it's just one size chip. So this has some chips, has some dust. And so you can, when you mix a product like cement with this, you put the moisture to it and then compact it, you get a real nice base. So they either call limestone screenings or dust. It's less expensive than AB3 for sure, and it makes a better finished surface for you to work with. I don't know of any place that bags this for sure, but AB3 does come bagged. Most box stores have it. And then when I think Menards has AB3 bulk and bag, and I didn't know that Menards did. I'm not promoting any business or product here really, but I know Menards does do bulk also. So if you have availability of a truck that you can do bulk, you can get it there. Some of the material yards that I know of in Johnson County will do bulk also. The quarries, big quarries, they don't like to do bulk, small amounts of bulk because it's a problem for them. So stores like Menards, Suburban, Riverview Stone, the one down on Kansas City, Kansas, that they do bulk. Sometimes some of the materials they have are a little bit expensive, so something like this limestone screen in the dust is a good option, very good option for your base. Okay, so I talked about using Type 1 Portland cement, about 5 to 6%. And so if you're mixing this at home, and you're mixing it in your wheelbarrow, or say maybe you happen to have one of those small mixers, water mixers, you can put in 10 shovels of your base material and half a shovel of Type 1 Portland cement. And Type 1 Portland cement's available at all the big box stores. The 90-pound bags, I'll tell you that. 94-pound bag. So, and then you want to mix it with water. You want to add enough water to make the particles wet. But if you get it too wet, you're going to be giving your strength away. So it's kind of you have to practice a little bit to see just exactly how much water. So you usually just squirting it with a hose. You're not pouring it in a bucket and putting it in there, but you have to kind of get an eye for how wet this needs to be, but not too wet to give away your strength, because the strength comes from the Portland cement. And so that's what you want to keep in this base material. And then you can use just a hand tamp. You've seen them in the hardware stores and every place else. You can use a hand tamp to compact it. And you don't need to go get and rent a vibrating compactor unless you unless you're doing a big area and, you want to compact it a little more, you could rent a vibrating plate compactor from some of the rental stores. They do a great job, but they're heavy to load and unload. And, but they do a great job, but a hand tap is well enough for what we're doing here. First off, you also want to tamp the subgrade, the soil down before you start too, because you excavated that out, and so sometimes it's loose. So you want to tamp that soil down first. Now I'll get to a cross section here. We'll see that. Here's the cross section. So this is a garden path. And so you can see you had to excavate down, take this soil out. And then you want to compact right through here. And then this is your base material. Cement or fly ash treated crushed stone base. And that's 3.5 to 4 inches. If you get a good 3 inches, that's good, but I'd rather see 4 is better. And then a lot of the people that sell these concrete pavers, whatnot, they tell you to put 1 inch of sand underneath there. Not a good idea. In certain parts of the world, that's all right, because they're not putting this base down first. Certain parts of the world, they don't have to do this. They're just like in New Mexico and some of the arid parts of the country, they're just putting this right down on natural ground. And so 1 inch of sand is good there, but 1 inch of sand on top of this, these bricks can shove and move on you. So you want to use just enough sand to level out this, because you'll have some irregularities in the top of this crushed stone base that you'll want to use some sand to kind of level it out. So when you're laying these brick on there, you just get the sand down, get a little hand trowel, just kind of smooth it out as you go, and then level them with just a straight board back and forth to get them level. And then to keep them in place, you have this edge retainer, and that's what this is here. That's what this edge retainer, and you can get some nails to drive down through here. These are bigger nails. They're called a 60 penny nail is the one that's readily available. Sometimes you can find 40 penny nails, and they're plenty good. They're cheaper for sure. And so a 40 penny nail then down through here will hold this right in place. And then you can also buy this in PVC on Amazon, and it comes in a roll. It's a little hard to handle because it's in this roll, but if you lay it out in the sun long enough, it will warm up enough that you can handle it easier, and it's less expensive than the aluminum. Just an aside here, I was going to give you a story of why. Some of you know that when you go to the hardware store and you say, I want a 16 penny nail, and they designate this penny as a D. You've seen it. And why do they call it a D? And why is it called 16? What's the story behind this? Well, back when the blacksmiths used to cut nails, and he sold cut nails, you got, for 16 pennies, you got 100 nails. And so for a 10 penny nail, for 10 pennies, you got 100 nails. So that's where the penny came from. So how come the D? Well, the Latin word for penny in Roman times was the denarius. So that's where the D came from.
Wow.
Now the rest of the world now is metric. And so when you go and get nails now, they say there's so many millimeters long, because they're all metric. But one of these days, the US might get metric. I don't know. But everything else, if you bought any plywood lately,
Yeah,
yeah, it's metric.
right,
Yeah, you can't buy a 4x8 sheet of plywood.
right,
It's metric. You can't buy a 1/2 inch sheet of plywood. It's metric.
right.
And so to match the world market, that's what we're having to do. Is the rest of the world's metric. So if we want to be in the world market buying and selling, we have to be metric.
Mhm.
So we'll get there. Just gonna take some time. But we had our chance clear back when Thomas Jefferson was president, but he decided not to go that way. So that's kind of the story. If you're doing this, or if you're doing even a small border or a pathway, you want to put this underneath that border, whether it's bricks or whatever you're using for a border, you want to have a base underneath it, because it'll hold them in place and they won't get shifted around. Okay. Here's an example. The good and the bad. This has been in since 98. And still in place. Just put like that. We do get a little frost heaves along the edges sometimes if we have a real bad winter, but they go right back down. But it does have that crushed stone base underneath it, and it does have some of this material to keep it in place. And this, this is a driveway, and these are real nice 4x4 by 8-inch brick pavers. I mean, these are, if you go to find these, a lot of times they're $1 a piece. And but as you can see, it's pretty irregular and grass is growing through it, and it's just it just wasn't put down right. And I would never tell the man that owns this that it wasn't. I did take a picture of it. He allowed me to do that. But, so that's kind of what you end up with if you do it one way. Sure, this is a lot of trouble. It's a lot of trouble to go through, but it's still looking good. And it'll look good for a long time. I've got one picture. I'm sorry I didn't bring it, but it was a brick sidewalk that my dad put down in 1947. And it's still there, but not a ripple in it. He did not use crushed stone base. He actually poured a real thin layer of real weak concrete. And that was back when concrete was much cheaper than it was, but it's a real nice kind of a curved drive walkway, and still there, 47. So now we're gonna get into raised beds. And this is a big item because you can spend quite a bit of money on them and they'll last longer, or you can go more economical and they won't last as long. They'll be functional, they'll work for you for some time, but they won't last as long. So first thing you got to think about is the quality of the lumber material. They do make a treated lumber now that you can grow vegetables up against and around. Before, they used a preservative called CCA that was not good because it contaminated the vegetables, but they do make environmentally friendly treated material now. And so I did a little research. These are kind of current prices, but to get a treated lumber enough for a 4x8 raised bed, the lumber will cost you somewhere around $35 plus or minus just for the lumber. If you buy this lumber untreated, yellow pine, and then you paint it with some kind of outdoor paint, exterior paint, if you paint it, it's only $23 for the board, but then you got the labor to paint it, the cost of the paint. I don't know where all that takes you, but it's much better just, I think, to go ahead, bite the bullet. Buy the treated, it's gonna last longer, and I'll get to a story here about a raised bed shortly. But then we want to talk about the type of fasteners you use. And I'll show you some pictures of some fasteners later on, but one of the ways you can fasten it is 3 3-inch deck boards going into the joint. That's the most economical way. We came across another way on this last raised bed that I worked on, and it was I'll show you a picture of the thing, but it was a galvanized cap that fit over the corner, and then the galvanized angle that we put on the inside of the joint. So the difference between those is considerable. The 3 deck screws for each corner are gonna cost about 80 cents. And if you use this galvanized cap and corner cap and the angle, it's gonna run about $2.50. And the jury's kind of still out on this cap and this joint, because I just found them from a company called Zorro online, at Zorro.com, and they sell the inside angle, which is a 3-inch angle. I was gonna go with 4 inches, but the price for a 4-inch jumped way up, and 3-inch was adequate to hold the corner. And so the jury's still out on if this is gonna help us, but when I get to a picture, I'll show you the problem we have with the frames as far as not staying together. Type of irrigation. Once again, you can go out there and use a hose on it. You can put in a trickle system, not too expensive, works better use of the water. So you can do that. Or you can set up a sprinkler system that waters the whole bed. So you say you have 6 or 8 beds, you set up a sprinkler system that rotates back and forth and does all of them, but once again, not the best use of the water. But you want to think how long you want these beds to last. Or you just putting them in, let's just say, oh, I want to do some raised bed gardening, vegetable gardening. But I don't want to spend a lot of money and see how it goes. So you can go in more economical. And then when those play out, because they will, I'll get into a story about the raised bed garden. They'll play out. And so then you may want to step up your game a little bit and go with a little more expensive one, especially after you've become proficient at raised bed gardening. It's an easier way to garden for sure, but it does take a little tweaking of your mind on what you want to really do with your garden. So here's the raised bed I was telling you about. And you can see right there, also, I got a more detail of that, but there's the galvanized cap on that corner. And I was on the ground floor when we first put this raised bed gardening in, and one of the volunteers that was working on this community garden made these frames up in his garage himself, and he painted them, and they looked real nice. And I had never picked up, so I hauled them out. We set them, and I'm thinking that they lasted somewhere. They were put together with screws on the end, on the corners right here. And I think they lasted somewhere around 5 or 6 years, something like that. And so then we had a Boy Scout who wanted to do a scout project and replace these. And so, as you well know, when they build houses, there's always a scrap pile. Well, he went out and scavenged some scrap lumber, 2 baits, and put it all together. They weren't treated, they weren't painted. They lasted about 3 years. So, so then we had another Boy Scout, wanted to do a scout project. And so he said, we're gonna get a handle on this one. And so we said, please bring your plan to us. Well, he didn't have a plan. So we said, we've got a plan. Here's what we'd like to do. See if this fits your budget. So this lumber is treated. And then these corners are what I was talking about, more expensive corners. And then we didn't do one thing that I wanted to do as far as extending the life of these, and I'll get into that at the end. But they're holding up very well, but like I said, the jury's still out on these. We did make one mistake, a big mistake on this. We did not specify to use deck nails, because these came with nails. Or excuse me, screws. These came with screws. We did not specify to use deck screws. Problem is, when you're using treated lumber, an ordinary galvanized screw will not last. It'll eventually rust out. The material that they treat this with attacks that galvanizing, and it breaks down. And so that's the one mistake we made. We should have used a deck screw. If you're familiar with deck screws, they're usually the gray or tan. That's a coating they put on there, so that the material that they treat these lumber with, it won't attack the screw. It'll last. So that was one of the things that we made a mistake on. In fact, I'll show you a picture. I opened the backside of one of these up with the angle, and I started to see a little rust on the screw. I thought that was a mistake. So we're learning as we go, but we're learning as we go with this too, because like I say, we went through 3 iterations to finally get to where we are now. This is irrigated with a trickle system. There's a spigot around the corner here, and they come around with a hose, and then they've got lines laid underneath each one of these beds, and then they come up into the bed with a trickle system. So the irrigation part is very efficient for this particular community garden. Here's a raised bed in a bed. Right there. These, this is only 2 bricks high, and it does have a base underneath it, a crushed stone base underneath it. And then we used a material called masonry mastic to glue these bricks together. The only problem with the masonry mastic is it does have a life. And so after about 4 or 5 years, this mastic started to pull away from the bricks. So we had to go back in and reapply the mastic, clean the old mastic off and put new mastic on there. But I think that's kind of the nature of the beast. I just don't think it's made to last that long. Because it was a good clean surface we put it on, and we did it at the temperature they recommended and all that, but it just didn't seem to last as long as I thought it should. But it did keep everything in place for 4 or 5 years, and then it didn't come loose every place. It just kind of randomly would come loose, and we didn't know why, but we cleaned off and reapplied the mastic, put it back on. So that might be your answer to your wall stones. Okay. Here's an outline in the garden area. There's the base we've put in. We dug this all out. It's about 4 inches deep, about 4 or 5 inches wide at the top. And treated that crushed stone with cement, tamped it in. And so then the finished product. There's the finished product. These bricks have stayed in place pretty well. We've got one right down here in the corner. You can't see it because you see my shadow there taking the picture, but we got one down there in the corner that just doesn't seem to want to stay in place, but you can see these others have stayed in place very well. This has been in I'd say this has probably been in about 10-12 years. And no movement in it. Stayed right there. So, best sizes for a vegetable raised bed. This is the most economical way. You get 2 2x8, 10 feet long. So you cut 4 feet off, so you got a 4x6 bed. Put the 4 on the insides. And then the 6 the other way. Another raised bed, 2x8, 12 feet long. You got a 4x8 bed. And if you wanted to go longer with your beds, you can, but the longer piece of lumber that you buy, the more expensive that it is. Even though it's the same dimension wise, like a 2x8 10 and a 2x8 20, big difference in the cost. So this is probably 4x8 is probably the ideal size, because after this, if you went up to, see, I think the next size up might be a 16. You went up to a 16, then you would make it a 4x12 bed. The cost of that 16-foot board isn't proportional to the 12-foot board, put it that way. So you're paying for that extra length. So here's the construction part when you're building a bed. Corners are fastened either with a 3-inch deck screw or the inside corner angle and corner cap. And here's something that's very important. You want to put your short board on the inside, because you pick up almost 2 square feet by doing that. You put the short board on the outside, you give up this 2 square feet. And 2 square feet in a raised bed is pretty significant. So that's the way you want to do that. Put the short board on the inside, and it doesn't affect the strength of the joint one way or the other. So that's just something I always, and a lot of people don't think about that. You know, they're putting it together and first time, and so but that's an important thing to think about. So here's the cap and the angle that I was talking about. And you can't see the rust necessarily, but I can see it when I opened it up there, that it was having some problems because, and it's only been in, I think this possibly might be, it's coming up to its 4th season. It's had 3 seasons in, and we could go back in and change these screws out, but I think we'll just kind of see how long this lasts this way, and then we'll know in the future how to do it correctly. This is a way to extend the life of this frame, and we didn't do this. I think I told you this is one of the things I wish we could have done before we set these frames. And this is a kind of a neat line of what I would suggest, but I would suggest excavating out. This is your base level. This is the ground out here, this line right here, and take a pickaxe or a shovel and excavate out a clay spade would work good, because they're about 4 inches wide. Excavate out roughly 4 inches wide, you know, I know the sides won't be as nice and neat as that, and about 4 inches deep. And then line that with fabric, there's all kinds of construction fabrics that you can get, but you want to get one that's fairly heavy. And you want to line that with this fabric, lay the fabric up on the sides, and then put a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch clean limestone chips or pea gravel, whichever one is more economical for you. Put that in here and then lap the cloth back over each other like that, and then set the frame on top of that. So what we're doing here is we're taking away this moisture that's gonna be up against that board. This will always stay dry because it's free draining. And so we're taking that moisture away, and so that should extend the life of this frame considerable. A lot of trouble. It is a lot of trouble, but you spend a lot of money already. This isn't too expensive. 'Cause it's only 4 inches by 4 inches. So the clean screen chips and the cloth, pretty minimal cost. And so that's something we came up with. One other item that we came up with was, and I took a picture of it, but it didn't show up real well. But during the winter, let's just say you've ended your season, you've gone in and you put some, you're going to improve your soil, so you're putting some compost or some crushed leaves or different things on top of your bed. And then you're gonna work them in probably, and wait till spring. And then to plant. So after you got this worked in, is go ahead and pull the soil back away from these boards during the winter time. It makes a pretty good mound in the middle, but it's already mixed and ready to go. Because you put your soil amendment in there, so if it's compost, it's gonna sit there and compost some more and better. And so mound that up, and that should extend the life of these boards quite a little bit, because it won't have the moisture against it all winter long.